So good morning, SALDA members. It's Sabina Hedia here, the chairperson of your association. I'd just like to thank you all for joining our last session for 2021. The year has flown by, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to a little bit of a break at the end of the year. So just in terms of some reminders, obviously our AGM is going to take place in February. Sarah will send out the agenda and the relevant correspondence for voting at the beginning of January. So yes, the AGM is in February. Sarah will send out the correspondence beginning of Jan in preparation for the meeting. We also want to remind our members about the code compliance. Some of you may have just joined the SARMED meeting that took place this morning, reminding us about the changes there and of course the importance of our staff to actually adhere by the code and obviously join in on the relevant training sessions and get the certification. And now I'd like to mention to you that we've often asked our members what do they want presented at our general meetings. And one feedback was for specific assistance in terms of the virtual world that we are now in. Just want to introduce our speaker. We have Warren here with us today. And Warren is the Managing Director of Blank Page Publishing and launched Media Brief Africa in 2017 as the industry's first real-time medical news platform for healthcare professionals. Serving up news as it happens, MedBrief Africa makes it easy for healthcare professionals to stay informed on medical political issues, practice management, medtech conferences, CME, pharma info, and more. So I really would like to welcome Warren. Thank you for your time today, Warren. We look forward to hearing about what you have to share with us.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for having me. I always find it weird to be asked to speak in these forums on a topic that has become second nature, because I don't necessarily see myself as an expert. But when I put my presentations together and I put a little history, which is the opening slide, I've been at it for a while, so hopefully I can share some of the learnings that we've had along the way, because we certainly didn't know it when we started, but we've learned some stuff over the way. I'd also like to say that that opening shot of me in this, I am wearing a different t-shirt. I don't always wear the same stuff, I promise. Also, just I've got an iPad on which I'm not used to presenting on, so I will be looking across to the right, and I'll try to engage on the camera when I speak. So please excuse my eyes darting around. I'm just going to open up the presentation.
In fact, while you're opening up the presentation, if I can ask everyone to put themselves on mute. We do hear somebody in the background doing their thing.
So another tip for your meetings, when you have digital meetings, if you hold your cup filled with wine and you just blow in it, it looks like tea.
Thanks, Warren.
So Access Health. I was introduced as Blank Page, which is really who we are at this point in time. But there's a new journey coming forward, which is I've branded this presentation as Access Health, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end. But to start, I just want to take you through that journey I mentioned, the evolution of Access Health, but really it's the evolution of kind of our industry, how we've marketed to our doctors and our HCP customers that we're trying to reach, and how the elements have changed. So 20 years ago, there were print magazines, Medical Chronicle, Medical Specialist Forum, and various of these. There was a specific pediatrician one, I remember. And in those days, I wasn't publishing in the medical industry. I was publishing in retail, also print magazines, and there were reps. And of course, there were printed company brochures and the like. So a lot of print focus, which was obviously expensive, hard to update, and all the other issues that we now know about that time of our lives. 10 years ago, I got into medical publishing. We launched the first suite of digital magazines. Some of you through SARMED and our association there may have seen me launch those many years ago, where we started to realize that there was something more to be done with digital. At the time, the page flip magazines were the rage. I think now we know they were a bit gimmicky, and the user experience wasn't great, but at the time everyone was interested, and it was new and it was fresh, and people got on board. Digital brochures replaced printed brochures, which of course were cheaper to do, and you could always update if you discontinued a line or got a new product in, easy to update. And of course, the one consistent still, the reps were still there, and you're going to see that coming through as I carry on. 5 years ago, eventually, we saw the drop-off on our digital magazines and realized that globally there'd been a shift in the way news and content was consumed. I'll get more to that in the next slide. So we launched the MedBrief Africa app and web platform almost as a test, because we saw the world moving to mobile and web consumption of content. We didn't know very specifically if this market was an early adopter or a late adopter within the sector. So we launched it as a test into the South African market. We also saw the onset of digital product directories in digital format, and some other digital platforms, digital brochures, for example, going out in the medical field through a company called MedInformer. We've seen EM Guidance doing guidelines and some dosage calculators and what have you. So various digital platforms came forward, but the one constant, again, the reps were still there. And next year, I'll take you through in my last slide a bit about what we're doing in Access Health and how we see this market going over the next 5 to 10 years. And again, please, I just also want to say, please make sure that you're jotting your questions down. So at the end of this, we can get into a bit of a Q&A. It's one thing listening to the presentation, but often I find the real meat comes out when you ask the questions. So please do so while I'm talking. I can't see the questions coming through. I'm just seeing my presentation, but at the end, we'll go through them. So the change over the years and why we've seen it. And again, it's pretty obvious looking back now. But there's some key elements here that we need to understand in terms of understanding how we tackle these elements and use them to our advantage in reaching our market. So as news consumers, we expect things in real time, and we want it to be instantly available. And the example I always use here is the cash and transit heist. It seems silly in this context, but those things happen on the highway, and within minutes we are watching it on WhatsApp. Even before the news, we certainly aren't waiting till the end of the day to watch the bulletin on TV or the next day to read the newspaper. We are seeing things as it happens, and that's how we now expect to see things. We also consume content in small chunks and on the go. No one sits down now, and whether you're reading a magazine, a news magazine, or whether you're reading a newspaper, whether you're doing it on a website, no one sits for 2 hours, specifically in the business-to-business context, sits for 2 hours consuming content, whether it's relevant to their business or not. We just don't have that kind of time. No one is sat in their chair, I don't think, not that I've seen, or certainly not in our positions, not mine, for 2 hours at a time with nothing else to do. So you just sit reading content. So bite-sized chunks is the new consumer consumption pattern, and on the go. And of course, the only thing that goes with you when you're on the go is this, which is why mobile has jumped straight to the fore. And that last little stat at the bottom there, 2017 saw 94% of all news consumed on mobile. Now that stat, interestingly enough, came out of the US. And immediately when I read it, I thought, well, the US obviously is ahead of the game in terms of digital news and all the rest of it. But on further reading and further learning, within the African context, not so much, because the US and typical first world countries, terrestrial infrastructure when it comes to connectivity has been well advanced. So you've always been able to get your news on your desktop, download stuff, get onto websites and what have you. For a long time, I worked in the States in the early 2000s, and it was lightning fast then. So they didn't have the need to jump to mobile as quickly as Africa has, because Africa often doesn't have electricity, but this is charged if you remember to charge it. And of course, it's a lot cheaper on mobile within the African context as well. So that stat in 2017 of 94% in the States was probably slightly more within the African context. We also want access to more content, and we want personalized content. And I'll talk to the personalized content in a bit later. But the point to mention there, I mean, I as a media guy, when this whole privacy thing exploded, and WhatsApp was changing its policies, and everyone was having a heart attack and wanted to go to Telegram, wanted to go all these fancy platforms, I was quite the opposite. I feel that I want personalized content. So if Google or Facebook or whoever are going to monitor what I'm looking at, and use that to serve me more appropriate content and advertising, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm all for that. Relevance is what we want. I don't want to be shown adverts for the brand new Range Rover. I'm not in that market. Show me the new Amarok, for example, and I'm game. Yet, we haven't been able to see that. I still read News 24 and I still get the wrong kind of advertising coming. So for me, I love that monitoring of behavior to serve appropriate content to users. So what are the benefits of all of this to marketers? Again, if you listen to my talk at the Summit conference, this is exactly the same presentation, but I'm going to talk to some of the different points that we've learned since then, although it wasn't that long ago. But there's an increased number of touch points with the customer. Now, that's always been a strategy with marketing. That's why it's called the marketing mix. That's why when people do consumer advertising, Danone Yogurt as an example, they're on TV, they're on the billboard, they're in the magazine, they're on their digital. They are trying to reach their customers at multiple touch points to reinforce their message. And digital enables us to do that a lot more efficiently. So the strategy is the same. The methodology of doing it is different. Advantage of user influence. So through digital content, obviously you can share and engage with that content, and one user may share a piece of content with another user, and that strategically when producing content, people talk about viral. I don't think you're going to get viral so much in our industry. But the same concept. You want to create content and put content. Someone who's consuming it wants to actually share with someone else, with a peer. You want to make it that interesting that someone says, "Have a look at this," and that's that user influence that we can take advantage of within digital platforms. Limitless opportunity to educate within the device sector. That's obviously critical. And I talked to it a bit later, but I'll touch on it now. With the type of content, using animation, using video, and what have you, you can really drive that education and engagement with your content. Measurable. Again, I'll touch on this a bit later, but obviously within digital platforms, it's important to understand the metrics to make sure whatever platforms you use are providing you with those metrics. But to understand those metrics is also critical, and I'll touch on it a bit later. The ability to target exactly who you want to speak to, so no wastage. You can profile within digital media who you're talking to. So within the MedBrief Africa platform, we have a number of sections in there based on therapeutic areas. So we have everything from allergy through to urology. So if you're trying to reach a cardiologist, for example, within the MedBrief Africa platform, you'd run your content and your banners and all of that stuff within the cardiology section, knowing that it's 100% opt-in in terms of the user journey. A cardiologist will come into the MedBrief Africa site or app. They will then navigate to the sections. They will go to the cardiology section, and they will then consume that content and what have you. Now, anybody going into that cardiology section has an interest in cardiology. There's no wastage there whatsoever. Otherwise, they simply wouldn't be in that section. No urologist who's got no interest in cardiology is going to end up in that section unless they do have an interest in cardiology, in which case the point stands. They're interested. So it's 100% accurate in terms of who you're targeting. And ours is a dumbed down way of doing it. I'll touch on it later in terms of where Access Health is going on how we're going to do it a lot better. But even in our dumbed down version, when you're in that section, you are exposing yourself to people who are interested in what you have to say. And the advertising is the same within our environment because it's business to business. If you're putting the correct advertising in the correct platforms, your user should be interested in your ad. It's not like a consumer platform where if I see, going back to the Danone example, if I see the Danone yogurt ad, neither here nor there, I'll eat whatever my wife puts in the fridge. But within our context, within the medical world, when you're presenting a cardiologist with a cardiology or a hypertension or a blood thinning drug, for example, they're interested. So there is no ad irritation. Obviously, there's a user experience to that, but we take that into account. Interaction with the customer without being present. So again, digital technology enables you to have interaction, whether it's through pop-up surveys whether it's clicking on a banner to link through to a website, whether it's watching an animation that you can then either like or share. You can actually engage and interact with the customer without physically being present. That comes back to the top point also with that number of touch points. It's easier to use sales levers such as discounts or added value because of that interaction I've just spoken about. You can incorporate these kinds of things into your overall strategy through your banners and your content. And you know, it doesn't have to be content in a platform. You know, we're talking direct emailing, we're talking your own, you know, digital platforms, we're talking third-party platforms like mine. You know, whatever the platforms are that you're using, you can implement these things. And of course, you can reach more customers for no more cost, really. Digital enables that kind of multiplication of that reach, which has always been difficult in print, and it's still crazy to think back to my print days and even the digital magazine days about how we used to do things, almost insanely, but what we can do now. So how has this affected the medical marketing mix? As I said earlier, it hasn't really. It's the marketing mix is the same. You're just changing a little bit of the methodology. It's just the method of delivery that's changed. So, and I always use the example of a printer. To use a printing example, a printer has the printing machine, and they have the colors that they put into that machine, and it's always your 5 colors, your cyan, magenta, all of those. And then they mix those and tweak those to get the net result. So they run a few test pages, and the color doesn't come out as they want. So they go back to the beginning of the machine, they tweak those colors. So your marketing mix is the same. You've got all of these elements that you can use, and it's your reps, and it's your banner advertising, and it's your content, and it's your direct mailers, and it could be your SMSs or WhatsApps or whatever the case may be, or your webinars and that kind of stuff. And you've got to measure using the metrics that you're given, understand those metrics, and then tweak them. And tweak them to suit. So you might end up starting with a certain mix, which is X% webinar, X% banner, X% content, whatever the case may be. And through analysis over time, you tweak those inputs to get a better result at the end. And you can engage with your market on where they're seeing you and how they're consuming it, because you can even ask them via surveys, but you'll be able to see it within the platforms that you use. So it's about tweaking that mix to suit your particular business, your particular products, and your particular customers, because who you are targeting within the medical space also has an influence on what your mix should be. I know that you know, I talk about the example of a cardiologist, but if you think of the personalities across the medical spectrum, they're quite diverse and they're quite interesting, and you have to use different levels of the elements to really penetrate through to the subconscious of some of them versus others. So historically, the order was always face-to-face with reps. I'm a firm believer of a face-to-face engagement. I loved the conferences in the old days. I love a face-to-face meeting. I battle with these group presentations, not this one, but where you're trying to engage with an audience, because everyone's got those little icons with the initials if you're on Teams. You can't see who's nodding in the corner, so it's become a lot more difficult. But face-to-face is, and I think will still be massive. So your rep force needs to be trained up on how to use digital media, because they are still, for me, the front of it. And historically, it was the reps, it was face-to-face, it was then advertising, and it was then content. If you think about it, you'd place an A4 ad in a magazine, call it Medical Chronicle. You'd do most of your talking in the ad, and the ad was the hero, and that's where everyone kind of focused their attention, and you got agencies on board, and you put money into the design. And if the publisher liked you, or you had a good relationship with them, they would put maybe half a page or a full page of content next to your ad, or put you in a feature that might have something to do with what you're trying to talk about. But that's changed dramatically within digital platforms and digital media. So today, the order is undeniably content, and content. And only because of COVID, we've got face-to-face at the end. I would put content and face-to-face side by side, because they actually work together. And then it's the banner advertising. I want to just say I'm at risk of sounding like the advertising is not important. It's absolutely important as part of the overall mix, as we've spoken, as I've spoken ad nauseum about. But it's understanding the role. It's understanding what it's there to do. So the banner obviously is now a lot smaller in whatever platform you're on, whether you're on a website or whether you're on an app or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's only even your logo that goes, but it's really there to drive recognition, top of mind awareness. It's you know, when a topic within your sphere comes up. I'm going to stay with the cardiology example. Excuse me if that doesn't apply, but you'll get the point. It's easier just to stay with the theme. When a cardiologist is thinking in a specific area, hypertension, if you have had your banner at multiple touch points, whether it's your logo, your pack change, or even just your color scheme, you drive that top of mind awareness and that recognition, which also helps when it comes to a face-to-face engagement with a rep or whatever the case may be. You want that image to be in the back of a mind, and that's what the banner does, but it works in tandem with the content. So you know, your content, it can be text, it can be video, it could be animation, as we've spoken about. Animation is great within this particular sector when we're talking about devices and equipment and what have you, to really drive that education on how to use, because you know, it's also not always the procurement person who's involved in the decision, and we're getting a massive increase in engagement with animated and video content and audio content as opposed to text. Another thing is also that it's often easier to produce the video and animated content than it is the text. For some reason, people have a blank page, so to speak, and it's difficult to get what's in your head onto paper in the written format. But sometimes just filming that training session in a quick 2-minute video, for example, and I say 2 minutes specifically, is you don't really want your videos to go over that. And if it is over that, then you break it up and you do it in sessions or forms or editions or volumes or whatever the case may be. But often easier just to film a training session, your head of training or a skilled rep or whatever the case may be, talking through a process rather than trying to put that into paper. It's also easier for the recipient to consume on the digital media. Remember, we're on the go, so you're often, you know, earphones might be plugged in, walking around, easier to have a look. In European context, you'd be on the subway or whatever the case may be. Brand association, also, you don't have to produce all the content. There's a lot of good content out there within whatever area you're in, and you're using that content to base your decisions on. You don't launch products on a whim. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of context that goes into your decisions to put a product to market, and you've got to use some of that. You don't want to give away your trade secrets, but you want to use as much of that as you can to, I mean, if the content and research that you guys have done has made you so excited about your product, why not use that to make your target market as excited as you are? And that, I suppose, is the takeaway from you know, your brand association. Also, if there's research done, associate that with content that sells your cause and drives your positioning, which is what content does, as opposed to banners. That's where you're getting the real guts of it. Some tips around video. It's on screen. I'm sure we'll share this presentation afterwards. So 95% retention as opposed to 10% with text. Short is better. I've mentioned you want to try and keep it under 2 minutes. 60% finish rate is good. This comes back to understanding the metrics, and this is important because there's a lot of platforms out there that you guys can choose from. I've mentioned a few of the good ones, and it's important that you get the metrics, get them to give you their stats and their engagement stats and metrics, but to understand them. So 60% finish rates on a video is good. If someone is telling you that they're getting 90% finish rates on all their video, it's highly unlikely. I haven't seen that consistently. You might get 1 or 2, but as a consistent figure, you're not going to get it. So look out for these markers. I'll say it again later, but just while we're talking on the point, another one would be email engagement. If someone has a distribution list of 1,000 names, and you're paying them to send a bespoke letter to that 1,000 names, and they tell you that they typically get 75% opens, it's nonsense. No one gets 75% opens. If you get 40%, you've shot the lights out. If you're getting a 70% open rate on a bespoke emailer, you should be doing talks like this on emailing only. So know the metrics and understand the metrics within digital media is very important, because there's a lot of rubbish out there as well. Back to video, optimize your thumbnail. I think it's pretty obvious. Make sure that the thumbnail is attractive. It talks to the point. and you get obviously more opens of a video that you might be sharing within certain platforms, and you have to use text overlays so that the video can operate in silence. That is a very critical point, and it's one of the ones I like, because I didn't know that in the beginning of this journey. I certainly didn't know a lot of the stuff. I've learned it as we've gone along, and kind of we've made the mistakes that you guys don't have to. But a lot of video, and I don't know the stat, but a lot of video is actually watched in silence without headphones or whatever the case may be. Your office environment, noisy environment, maybe in a restaurant waiting for your date or your mate or whatever the case may be. A lot of video is consumed in silence. So text is absolutely critical so that it can be consumed in silence or with headphones, in which case you can hear as well. Webinars, that old chestnut, as we sit on one. I personally like them. I think they're a great way to get your message across, and if you choose the right platform, it's a great way to engage with your audience. But choosing the right platform is obviously critical, and understanding how best to market your webinars also is critical. So right platform, things to consider, how the platform operates on mobile. It seems obvious, but you've got desktop, and then you've got tablet, and then you've got mobile. So important when you're having a session with one of these platforms, ask that question. How technically capable your speakers are. I think we should be okay with our audience that we speak to now. Maybe not a year ago. Sorry, is someone trying to say something? Just want to make sure. All good?
All good. I don't see anything at the moment.
Okay. Sorry, I heard something come through. I thought maybe someone was going to say. Please just stop me on time. I can't see the time, so I'm not watching you.
I will do, Warren. Yes, I'm monitoring.
Super. So so how technically capable your speakers are, we should be good within this industry. Where the slides info sharing is required during the event. I've seen platforms which don't actually allow it, funnily enough. And also sometimes you're posting maybe sharing links within the platform, but then you can't access it afterwards. Because often, when you're watching a session, you don't have time to go click the link. It then opens the site. Now you're off the platform, so it becomes a bit clunky. So important to ask those questions. The length of the session, I think we already know. If you don't have a Zoom license, you're 30 or 40 minutes. So it seems silly, but do ask the question. And will there be networking required? So I think that, for me, that's the most important point. And it's one thing that I've searched long and hard for, is a platform that really pioneers that networking aspect. Excuse me. The key part that we're missing with all of these webinars and these virtual events is the ability to just chat with someone, go to the coffee machine and have a discussion, or go to someone's stand at an expo, whatever the case may be. So there are platforms out there. We've been doing a bit of work ourselves within the sphere. I think I found the one that I think is best. We're in the process of signing a license agreement with them. They're based in the UK. Very cool platform that enables kind of really enhanced networking. So you've got your live stream like we're doing now, and pretty much every platform is the live stream. But it's that networking between, if this were a session and then you're having, a coffee break, some people might get coffee, but really you want people to be speaking. So it's important to not only ask, because all the platforms will say that it's perfect and it works well. Get them to demo too. But I'll be holding an event probably in the new year on our new software that we think answers that question. I'll invite all of you guys. It'll be a free session. Choose the format. So presentation. What I'm doing now is great to kind of just blast information out, but sometimes a discussion where you've got panelists is also a good format to use. I emceed a webinar series last year on 12J tax initiatives, where a particular organization was targeting doctors to spend their hard-earned loot within this 12J format, and they could save tax. So the first few of these presentations were presentations. We had a lineup of speakers, tax experts, finance expert, the 12J expert, and it was good. But what I saw as the MC of it, there weren't a lot of questions coming through. People were just, zombie-like consuming the content coming at them, probably like what a lot of you guys are doing right now. And what I found is when the second phase of that series happened, is when we changed it to a dialogue, of discussion where all the panelists are on, the questions came a lot more, and there was a lot more engagement. And that discussion was curated. The panelists knew who I was going to ask what questions, when I was going to ask it, who I was going to ask first, and then straight afterwards I was going into the next one. We had planned how best to deliver the conversation to deliver what we wanted out of it. And in that format, the audience engaged. The questions we did two. The first one, I was unable as MC to keep up with the questions. There were so many coming through. For the second one, we had someone else in the background monitoring the questions and feeding them through to me. So give some thought to that. I think there's benefit in both, but I was impressed with how that discussion format went. Get an MC or host that knows what they're doing, not about your content, not about your devices, not about your businesses or even market. They must just know how to handle virtual platforms and know how to interact and you know, bring speakers on and turn them off and all that stuff. It just helps make the event go that much smoother. And then finally, a funneled marketing plan. So you've got your webinar, you've got your content, you've got your speakers. Now you need to get your audience in. And what you want to do, you want to start probably, I would say, 3 months before the event as an announcement to say that the event is happening. You don't have to share too much information. You can even still be getting your speakers together, but start getting that save the date out. And then probably every 2 weeks thereafter, you do a release. So you might release 2 speaker bios, then the next 2 speaker bios. Then you want to release some stats about how the registrations are going. We're up to 50 registrations, and then you go back into your speaker bio. So you have a marketing plan or communications plan building up to the event. But what you want to do is you want to increase the intensity of that marketing plan and the frequency of those posts and that communication as you get closer and closer to the event. So there's no point starting 2 months out and then throwing all the information, because by the time you get to the event, people are so sick of seeing your communication, they actually forget what the whole thing's about. So important to use that funneled approach. And another interesting stat is that often, you know, up to 60 or 70% of a webinar's registrations, not necessarily a member-based one like you guys are on, but where you're trying to attract a market, happen towards that right at the end. So you'll be getting very worried about your webinar numbers, but if you slowly increase that communication frequency and intensity towards the event, you'll notice that your registrations start to jump up. And we've seen a combination of content, again, your banners as always, and direct mailing being a good 3 to use for webinar marketing and education and reminders and all of that kind of stuff. And ensure that your software can put meetings in the diaries as well. Whichever platform you use, it's essential that part of that platform is when someone registers automatically, and whether it's Google Calendar or whatever the case may be, or Mac, it must be able to do everything. So that's webinars. Getting to the tail end here. So just some key learnings that we've seen over and please remember, when I started at MedBrief Africa in 2017, we launched in August. Oh, if I think back to what I actually didn't know, it's absolutely frightening. I'm not convinced that if I knew what I didn't know that I would have done it, but we did, and we've made it through by the skin of our teeth, and we've learned a lot, and I'm happy to share that stuff with you guys. So the first one's obviously not something we didn't know. HCPs are time poor, so don't waste their time with content that doesn't apply. We've kind of touched on the content enough, and ensure reps have a value to add when they call. I'll tell you about access insights at the end. Point there is, through digital media, your reps can increase the number of contacts they have with their customers, whether it's a key account person or whether it's a rep, whatever the case may be. So make sure whenever they do that through digital platforms that it adds value. And what I mean by that is a phone call from a rep to say happy birthday is probably more of an irritation than you think. You think you're doing the right thing. But sharing some content from a digital platform, say MedBrief Africa, from the platform, so hi doctor, I thought you might be interested in this, provided it's good content. And remember, that doesn't have to be your content. What you're sharing could just be good content in the platform. And that's a touch point, another touch point with the customer, and it's got value. So it becomes a valuable touch point, because with all of these touch points, suddenly you've got the doctors, you know, being hit from all sides. Just make sure there's value there. Otherwise, it's an irritation more than anything else. So Access Insights, what we're building there within I'll touch on now, within Access Health, is every HCP that comes into our platform and engages within the platform is going to be monitored throughout the journey. So from when they log into and they log off, what time they come in, what time they go off, what day of the week it is, what content they consumed, and all that content is tagged, so we can build up a profile of what a urologist is consuming versus a cardiologist, for example. How they engage with that content. Did they share it? Did they like it? Did they not like it? Thumbs up, thumbs down type scenario. What were the keyword searches? Are they looking for specific stuff? We're going to have a discussions and chat facility in there where we'll be able to monitor the topic of discussion. We won't be able to see the actual discussion, but you have to give the discussion a topic, and we then obviously record and analyze that. And all of this stuff is going to be put into a dashboard that we're going to make available on a subscription basis, where you can go in. So a rep, for example, to my point here, will go in. They know they've got a meeting on Monday with the cardiologist. The theme of this talk, the cardiologist, and they want to see, okay, what has he or she been consuming over the last week? Not by person, because we can't share that information, but what are cardiologists in KZN looking at currently? And it's a real-time dashboard, so you'll be able to see a leaderboard of the most searched words, the most read articles, the most engaged content, and all this kind of stuff. And the use case there is that your reps now have a lot of information. They know what to talk about. They know what the hot topic is at the moment, and whether it's political, HMI, NHI, all of these good acronyms, or whether it's clinical, whatever the case, the Access Insights will split that out to them. So again, we're just creating that to help you and your team and anyone trying to reach HCPs add value to that contact. HCPs are on the move, we know, in consult and surgery during the rounds. Mobile platforms are therefore critical, and it's not just I'm talking about doctors in this case, but it's any HCP is hardly sitting at their desk, so the same applies. Highly clinical content has dropped in popularity. Don't know why. It's obviously less true around CPD or CME, as it's now called. The practice management, health tech, business content, NHI, HMI, COVID for a while, ivermectin, these kind of things, although that's slightly more clinical. But it's really the business about medicine and practice management and health tech and softwares within the space that we see as being the topics that are becoming more and more popular, which again you'll be able to see through the Access Insights subscription. Some more key learnings when it comes to content. Think little bits often. Drip feed that content into the feeds that you're wanting to be in. So within the MedBrief Africa space, as I said, we've got all the sections and we call those feeds. So cardiology, with my example, you want to have an article of yours or some content that you are going to be sharing or associating yourself with. Because if you give us some content, we'll say this has been shared by. You want one of those to come in at least every second week, so that whoever comes in, remember, everyone's coming in at different frequencies to all these platforms. Some are every day. On average, in my platform, it's every 3 to 4 days. So you want to make sure that you're catching all of them, and you can only do that by drip feeding content within the feed. So if you imagine the long feed of content, you're only seeing this much on your phone, but that content feed is like so. You want a piece of your content there, piece of your content there, piece of your content there. So whenever people are coming in, they're going to be exposed to it. So drip feeding, as we've termed it, is critical. Changing material of your banners. So it seems obvious as I read it on my screen here, but I didn't know it when I started this. Because of the higher frequency within digital platforms, your banner and your material is being exposed multiple times to one user. Compare that to a magazine. In the magazine days, that ad is read or seen by a user only once, because you read that magazine once. Now that same user is seeing that ad. If they're coming daily, they're seeing it 50 times a month. So it stands to reason that very soon they'll no longer notice it. So it's critical within digital platforms across the board, because of the higher frequency of impression or exposure to a user, that you update your material. We like to say within our platform to do it at least every second month, and that can just be a color change. You might display your logo heavily, then change it to your packaging, and in your case is your actual product, whatever the case may be. But just update it. And key here is, so this is not easy. Digital media is more work than it used to be. We used to place our ad, run our material, and forget about it. We run it for 6 months in Chronicle. That's not the case anymore. This is far more effective. It's far more cost effective. It's far more efficient. It's measurable. All of those good things, but it is more work. So when you for example, briefing your banner material into your agency, brief in if you've booked your space within whatever platform you're going into for a year, brief in 6 sets of material so that every second month you can change. Don't wait and try and brief it in. Do it up front. I get this with all my clients, and it's difficult because you've drawn away from what you usually do to now design material, and it's cluttering and it's confusing, and it's not the way you want to do it. The content also, you need to sit down at the beginning, come up with a content plan. It'll take you a week worth of planning to get it done, but then you've got your plan sorted out. The other thing within your businesses, if I'm talking to decision makers here, guys, please find the budget to hire a content person, someone in charge of driving content across all of your platforms, across all of your touch points, and whether that's LinkedIn, whether it's MedBrief Africa, whether it's whatever other platforms you're looking at, it's going to be something that requires a person in full time. I can assure you, if it's not yet, it will be, and you don't want to be left behind. Amplifying your message by sharing, it goes without saying. So, in our world, the process is put your banners, drip feed your content, and amplify your message. And those are the 3 kind of pillars of using my platform. And it's the same pretty much in any platform that you're going to choose. And you should be choosing multiple platforms. So amplify that message by sharing. You then reiterate to people who may already have seen it in a platform. And you then stand the chance of reaching people who potentially aren't in those platforms you've chosen. So it's really important to amplify your message by sharing. And then again, as I said earlier, your reps should be sharing that content to their specific doctor customers directly from platforms, which can use email, WhatsApp, whatever the case may be, to reach your doctors, and make sure that content is valuable. You're not just sharing for the sake of sharing because you become an irritation. Share valuable content that you know that they will enjoy to see. Choose multiple platforms to gain multiple touch points. I'd love to sit here and say, please choose me, run all your stuff in me. We can do everything. We can't. Our new Access Health platform is going to do a lot more than we do now, but you must have multiple platforms, multiple non-competitive platforms. So if you're going to run, if you want to be in a news platform, you're going to want to be with me in MedBrief Africa and ultimately Access Health. If you want to associate with patient brochures, for example, you want to be talking to MedInformer. If you're targeting a market that has a heavy need for locums, for example, then you want to put some exposure through locum base. So there are many platforms, and you want to choose a mix of non-competitive platforms. No point going into 3 news platforms. Because the doctors typically will have their favorite. They're not going to all. So you want different platforms achieving different things, non-competitive platforms. We said it earlier. Measure and don't be fooled by ridiculous claims. Look at those metrics. Understand that no one's getting 75% opens on an email. And also understand within this market, more is not necessarily better. If you're after oncologists and you're trying to target them with your product, there are only 188 odd oncologists. So if someone says to you they reach 250, just look for the warning signs. And also when you're starting to talk impressions, understand those 250, how many times are they coming in? So in my platform, it's every 3 to 4 times. So I can only tell you maximum that you've got an impression rate of the market within my platform times by the frequency over a month. So think of these things when people are giving you the metrics, because I've seen a lot of interesting stuff out there. So that brings me to the end, but I'm just going to touch very quickly on Access Health, if I may, and what this is. It's going to be launched in March of next year. We launched MedBrief Africa as a test, so we just duplicated News 24. That was my brief to the developers. I said I want a News 24 for the medical industry, and I did that specifically because everyone knew News 24, so there wasn't a learning that needed to take place. But it really wasn't the way we wanted to do things, because Facebook and LinkedIn had been around for a long time. We'd seen how they were doing things, but we had to take this market kind of slowly through it. So Access Health is going to be exactly that. It's going to be the Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever the case may be, for the medical industry in terms of content. There'll no longer be sections like cardiology, oncology, whatever the case may be. A user will enter the platform and register their primary specialty, all of their ancillary interests, and this is the full list of medical spectrum, from GPs to specialists to pharmacists to lab technicians to whatever, medical officers, procurement at hospitals, whatever the case may be. You register yourself appropriately, and we will serve content based on that registration. And then we've got a tool that will analyze the behavior, obviously, which we're crunching into the insights tool I told you about. But we're going to use that to prioritize content within the system. So if 2 cardiologists go on day 1 in South Africa, by day 4, their feeds will look different because they've been consuming different content, and our recommendation engines will recommend appropriate content based on their behavior pattern. So that's and through that, there's going to be event information. There'll be obviously normal content on the business. There'll be clinical stuff. There'll be CME where you can actually answer the CME within the platform, and also there's a dashboard on your CME that we're building, so you'll be able to see what you have with various providers. And then we're going to be building some technology tools within the system. So what are these HCPs using on a daily basis within their practices? Dosage calculators, contraindication checkers, and the like. Medical guidelines we'll also be putting in, and then we're going to be bolting in third-party technologies. So things like Locum-Base and MedInformer that I mentioned already. Medical Orders is an online consumable store that we're going to be integrating into the platform, and we've got a long line of those things, and we're going to be rolling this right up into Africa. We have 24 countries that we're going to be targeting, and that is my unashamed self-punt at the end. So thanks very much for your time, and hopefully there's some questions.
Thanks so much, Warren, and well done on your unashamedly own punt. Always good to seize the opportunity. But of course, we want to thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights. I think it was some very valuable content for our participants in the call today. I'm trying to see whether there are any questions in the chat. I don't see anything at the moment. I see Sarah's put a quick poll quickly for everyone to answer, if you don't mind doing that. But in the meantime, I would just like to encourage you to take the opportunity to engage with Warren. As per his quote, don't be zombie-like. I know we all get into that mode at times with one call after another during the day, so it can be tempting to just get into that space.
I'm going to share my this comment thing, just my contact details, because I'm also happy to engage on a one-on-one basis with anyone who's interested.
Oh, that's a good idea. I must say there was another call that was taking place at the same time, so not all members could join. So I know I've already received a couple of queries whether we can share, obviously, the content and the recording with them. I think just some things that stood out for me, just in terms of 60% finish rate in terms of videos. Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah, and I thought about perhaps you could share some tips with us on videos. You encouraged us to use more videos going forward. What would you say one should consider when crafting a video?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things I already mentioned is just watch the time of the video. The length is very important. When you're getting into educational content, so you're trying to demonstrate a device or a piece of equipment, obviously sometimes it needs to be longer. So try assess whether you can break that up into sessions. To really try hit that 2-minute mark, because back to the first slide, it's that content consumption pattern is bite-sized chunks. And the time just doesn't exist in the course of the day to sit and watch a 10-15 minute video. So another one I mentioned earlier, which is absolutely critical, is to use text so that the video can be silence. But use experts. If you have access to experts or friendly people that can sing your cause, the influencer role is huge, across spectrums, and we've seen it in the medical sector as well. If you can get a well-respected voice within your particular sector to do a video with you and help you demonstrate and even talk, from a testimonial basis about personal experience using your particular product, obviously that's prize one. So yeah.
And would you recommend you get a professional videographer to assist, or do you think we all have skills nowadays that can help us with our videoing?
I would do the videoing in-house. Just a plain iPhone would do as good a job. This iPad that I'm on, the iPad Pro, it shoots the most unbelievable video. So I would just do that. I would then get a professional editor in, and that's the rub. The editors are the key to delivering the message that you want. So that I would definitely spend some money on.
That's a little nugget. Thank you for that. You mentioned also you're going to share an invitation in the beginning of the year with us. We look forward to that. I'm sure
Yes.
our participants would be keen on receiving that. And
I see Sarah's got her hand up.
Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks for great presentation. Very illuminating. Just want to check around branding. What would your recommendation be to change a company's branding? How often would that be needed to change to remain fresh and, in the news and out there? What would your suggestions be?
Are you talking corporate branding?
Yes, or even for an association or a company, any recommendations? Because things are changing on a daily basis. So it would be good to hear your thoughts around this. Thanks.
I would say as less frequently as possible. I think a lot of money and time and effort goes into building a corporate brand. So if it ain't broke, then don't try fix it. I think. But having said that, I think you just need to assess your design elements around logos and that kind of stuff, because it's the design part that sometimes can leave you looking a little bit stale, where you may need something fresh. So it's definitely not a time thing. If your design is working and it's in line with kind of current design trends, and you've put a lot of effort into building that brand, don't just change it willy-nilly. And I think like one of the best examples of this I've seen, and I was so against it when they were doing it, was Pick n Pay. Many years ago, Pick n Pay changed its branding to that very kind of square-looking font and what have you. And at the time, they'd been really, really battling as a brand, and this rebranding exercise cost them, I think it was 140 million rand to do, as you can imagine, for a company like that. And at the time, I thought that's mental, because they just got a new CEO, and I was like, oh, typical. Now it's going to be a new branding. It's nonsense. And eat my words, it was fresh, it was funky. They put in all this stuff. It really just gave a new life to the brand, and it was a lot of what helped them turn it around. So when I say, if it's not broke, sometimes you've got to. It doesn't necessarily look broke, but I suppose the answer would therefore be to continually assess it, and don't do it just because. But sometimes it is needed. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And Warren, a question about LinkedIn, because that's really popular. How do you go about increasing your networking numbers, your access out there as well? Any suggestions or tips around that?
Yeah, so I mean, LinkedIn. Look, a lot of what we're going to do in Access Health has been based on the LinkedIn model. We're not reinventing the wheel, so they're the experts, so we're just going to copy them. But we want to do it in this particular industry. So LinkedIn's pretty good at prompting you what to do. If you use LinkedIn, it'll often tell you, hey, someone's, you've had 5 views of this, perhaps mention someone's name, and that they'll tell you what to do. But it circles back to what I was saying in my last slide there, where you need someone doing this in your business. It needs to be someone's job. And it needs to be someone who knows what they're doing. So I know we're all under pressure, and I know business, has been tight over the last few years, and we're in this new normal and all these great things. But you've got to buy less coffee and employ someone. Do whatever you've got to do, because it's that mission critical, and it's that mission critical to be doing it right. Also within the LinkedIn environment, you've got a large non-HCP audience there as well, and everyone can kind of tap into anything. So within our space, someone needs to know what they can and can't be posting, because there's certain stuff you don't want the public to be seeing. On my side, that's why we have a registration on our platform, because we can't have consumers in there or patients in there. It's doctors only, or specialists, or HCPs only. I'd also like to actually, while I'm doing that, I'll type it just now. So when you register in MedBrief Africa, it asks for your HPCSA number, and this also talks to why it's important to know what you're doing on LinkedIn. If you don't have one, then just use the code blank page with a capital B and a capital P 2017. Blank page, capital B, capital P, one word, 2017, or one word. So, but back to the LinkedIn example is if you have someone whose job it is and they know what they're doing, LinkedIn's pretty good at just telling you what to do. But you also got to make sure you know who you're talking to.
Great. Thank you, Warren. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions from our members?
I've either delivered everything really well, or everyone's fast asleep, and I can never.
I'm hoping they're not zombie-like, Warren. I'm hoping. I think let's go with the former. You were excellent.
Super. Well, thanks very much. As I say, I put my details on the chat, so if anyone wants to engage one-on-one, yeah, more than welcome to. And please share my presentation. I'm happy for that to go out. It's you can take the branding off if you like, as long as people understand. Because if everyone does this better, it works for me. So I'm more than happy to help where I can.
Thanks again, Warren. Just on behalf of SALDA, the Southern African Laboratory Diagnostic Association, we appreciate your time today. And then just before I close the meeting with the rest of our members, I just want to remind you we'll be closed from the 16th of December and back on the 3rd, but we will be monitoring mails in case something surprising pops up at that 11th hour. As you know, we usually get a surprise by some kind of regs that need to be updated or have submissions put in. And then I also wanted to mention this is our last call for the year, so wanted to wish everyone well for December, for the festive period. Keep well, keep your family safe, travel safely, and also want to acknowledge Sarah. Sarah, thank you again for organizing, for all your work behind the scenes. We appreciate that as well. That's the end of our call today. I'm going to close the call. It's the 10th of November, the SALDA General Meeting, the last one for 2021. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Sabine. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.